Well, as I have mentioned, we are still in the season of Christmas, but we're moving into the season of Epiphany. This is the season when we talk about the light of Christ coming into the world, the light of Christ coming to the Gentiles, which would include us. And so it is a story for us. And we're just a few days away from beginning the season of Epiphany. So today we are telling the story that usually marks the beginning of that season, the coming of the Magi. Reading from the Gospel of Matthew. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him, and calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, and the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage.' When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary and his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road." Let us pray together. Creative Spirit, in these moments ahead, may our hearts, our minds, our lives be open to receiving your word for us this day. Amen. Let me ask you the question that came up in one of the Sunday school classes this morning. How many of you have made a New Year's resolution? Well, I'll tell you that I have made several for this new year. I have resolved to get in shape well enough to run another 5K this spring, and that's going to take a little doing. I have resolved to read a book a month that it doesn't have anything to do with theology, just reading for enjoyment. And I have resolved to take up some kind of a new spiritual practice. I haven't decided what that will be yet, so I'll let you know when I figure that out. So to all of you who have made resolutions, good for you. Pat yourselves on the back. That's to be celebrated, with one little caveat. According to most people who study these things, New Year's resolutions don't work at all. Would it surprise you to know that only about 8% of us who make a New Year's resolution will carry through with it during the year? And that 25% of us, according to studies that make New Year's resolutions, will end up giving up on them in this very first week of the new year. And I think they say even like 46% of us will get through maybe 6 months of it, but even after that, we will give up on them. Now, why is that? Why is it that New Year's resolutions are so hard to follow through on? Well, there really are people that study these and look at these things, and some of them say one of the reasons is that too often they're sort of set up as goals, as something that I'm going to try to do, but I'm not already doing, that I haven't been able to get myself to do. And they said the problem with that then is you've already sort of set yourself up with some negativity. You're already feeling bad about something you know you should be doing, but you're not doing, and so you're going to try to do it this year. And so your self-confidence, your self-esteem has already taken a hit before you've even tried to do this new thing that you're going to try to do. And then other people say, well, the problem actually is that you set up too high of a standard for yourself, something that this thing you're going to try to accomplish, it's too much, it's almost perfection that you're trying to reach. And we do okay for a couple of weeks, and maybe you say, I'm going to go to the gym, 3 times a week at the start of the year, and you do okay for a couple of weeks, and then what happens? Your schedule gets in the way, family things come up, you have to skip a few times, and now you're always feeling like, I already messed it up. I'm not going to be able to do what I'd already planned to do, and you've already set yourself up sort of for a fall. You're already feeling like it's going to be even harder now to achieve this thing I wanted to achieve. So what's the solution then? We just don't make New Year's resolutions? Well, I was reading an essay this week by the Quaker educator and writer Parker Palmer, And he was talking about how at the end of this last year, he was writing an essay that was going to be published on the web, and he decided to write it about his New Year's resolutions. And he types the title as he's writing it on the computer, My New Year's Resolutions, except when he looks at what he just typed, he realizes there's a typo, that what he's actually written is My New Year's Revolutions. My New Year's Revolutions, not resolutions. And he thought about it for a minute. He thought, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe this little creative slip of my hand on the keys has given me an insight that maybe what we should be doing, what God is asking for us to do in this new year, is not simply to make resolutions about our own private behavior, but to be part of a revolution, to be part of a change in the world and a change in the way that the world expresses and knows God, to be part of a revolution. And as I thought about that, I began to wonder, and see what you think about this, if this is exactly what Matthew is telling us in this story about the Magi, this strange and mysterious story of these visitors from the East. That it's really a story about the beginning of a revolution, a new way of understanding and knowing God in the world. Now, I call this story strange and mysterious because when you think about it, we really don't know very much about the story. We have very few details. We know that these guys were coming from some far-off place in the East. We know that they were probably stargazers or astrologers or something, and that's why they noticed the star. But beyond that, we don't really know anything about them. The story is really incomplete. We don't know exactly why they've come. We don't know exactly how they knew to come. We don't even know exactly what they expect to happen when they get to where the Holy Family is and they give them these gifts. We don't know why. I mean, you have to do some digging to figure out why these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then we don't even know what happens after these guys leave and go back home. We don't even know what happens to the gifts that they give to the Holy Family, and they're never mentioned. Again, all these unanswered questions. In fact, the church apparently has been so bothered by how many details are lacking in this story of the three wise men that over the centuries we've filled in the gaps. We've sort of done what Jewish rabbis do, this thing called midrash, where they fill in the details in between the lines of a story. And so we've done that with the three wise men. So think about all the details that we've added in. We've given them names. Some of you probably know what their names are. We've decided there were three of them. We have, in some cases, decided that they were kings. We'll sing that song today, even though that's not really in the text. We've, in some cases, given an ethnicity to each of them to say they're each from different parts of the East. In some traditions in the church, we've actually said that they come from prominent historical families, so we can place them within history. The Vatican recently discovered a document that claims to be a first-hand account, a gospel, you might say, of the wise men, a first-hand personal account of their journey. There is a church in Europe that claims to have the three skulls of the three wise men enshrined. And the legend goes that when they found these three skulls, the eyeballs were still intact, and all of the eyes of the wise men were all turned towards Bethlehem. And of course, we've written poems about the wise men. We've written operas about the wise men. We've written stories about the wise men. Just a couple of years ago, the same person that wrote Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, or Vampire Hunter, he wrote a book. He was so interested, he wrote a book about the wise men, trying to explain what their story was before they got to the Holy Family and then what happened to them afterwards. Now, why is it, do you suppose, this story in particular, we're trying to fill in all these details, that we're not satisfied just to sit with this incomplete story? I mean, let's admit it, it's not really the perfect story for Epiphany. If we were going to make up a story today about the first people to come to Jesus and to bow down and worship him as a king, is this the story we would tell? I mean, would we choose to have those first people be some guys from some other country who are part of some other religion, outsiders to the Jewish faith, be the ones that come to Jesus? Would we tell a story about a bunch of guys who are totally lost? They have no idea where they're going. They're just following this star. They're so lost, they're so stupid, that the one person they stopped to ask directions from, King Herod, is the last person they should have talked to. He's the one that wants the baby dead. And then they bring these ridiculous gifts to a baby shower. Who brings gold, frankincense, and myrrh to a baby shower? The story doesn't make any sense. And then they leave. They've had this experience with the Christ child, and then they go back home, and as far as we know, they haven't been converted in any way. They're still the religion they were when they showed up. They're not Jewish, certainly not Christian by the end of that story. They go on home. what are we to do with this story? It's confusing, it's mysterious, it's incomplete. It is not necessarily the perfect Epiphany story that we might tell. And in that case, maybe it is the perfect Epiphany story. Because perhaps what Matthew's doing here is he's heralding the ministry of Jesus, that the ministry of Jesus will be to imperfect people. People who are a little quirky, people who are different, people who are outsiders, people who are lost on their way. In other words, people just like us. It is an imperfect story for Epiphany. It's a story for people like us. People like us then that are perfectly set up to follow the Magi on this journey towards the light of Christ, this mysterious journey that we continue to be on together towards understanding more deeply what the light of Christ is in the world and how we can be part of it. So in this season when maybe we are being challenged to let go of our perfect resolutions and trying to follow them perfectly, perhaps we need to embrace this imperfect story that challenges us to be part of not just resolutions within our own behavior, but be part of the revolution of God's light that changes the world. What do you think about that? Do you want to be part of a revolution within the world? To be part of a revolution then means that to be ready in this new year for things in your own life to change. That I need to be ready for things in my faith life to change, to be open to new experiences of faith, new understandings of faith, to be willing to study and learn something that I didn't know before that might make me go, oh, that's not how I understood Jesus. That's not how I understood God. But I'm open to the Spirit moving in me, the light of Christ moving in me and propelling me in a different way to be part of the change in the world. It means being part of a revolution as a church, being open to new experiences as this church, new experiences of how we do ministry together, new experiences possibly of how we do worship together, new experiences of how we study together. It might be meaning being part of a revolution of new experiences of who we welcome into these doors. People that are going to come in like wandering magi who have different ways of seeing the life of faith, who have different experiences of the world, and being open to letting them change us. Change the way we see the life of faith. Change the way we understand what it means to both hold on to and release the light of Christ into the world. I think perhaps the challenge of the story is that what Jesus asks of us is not perfection in this new year, but passion. Like these wise men who are passionate enough to follow this star. They don't exactly know where it's leading them, but they trust that something will change. Something new will happen to them. Jesus is asking of us not our perfection, but our passion for justice, our passion for peace, our passion for love in the world. And passion, by its very definition, means it's not something we just talk about or we think about, but it's something we do something about. I also think the challenge today then is to say that we're not being challenged just by Jesus to have some resolutions about the new year, but to be part of a revolution, a change in our own lives and a change in the world through this justice, this peace, this love that Christ brings into the world. And I want to say, and this is something I deeply believe, if we are following Christ, if we are following the light of Christ into the world, and it isn't changing us in any way, then we're not doing something right. If we're following the light of Christ in the world, and isn't it changing how I live my life or how the people around me are experiencing who I am and how I am in the world, we're not doing something right. If we can follow the light of Christ in the world, and it makes no difference if I did or I didn't, my life would be exactly the same, we're missing out on something. We're missing out on that opportunity to be part of the revolution, the change that the love of God, the light of Christ can bring into the world. And so here we have this imperfect story for the beginning of this new year, challenging us to give up being perfect people. That's not what Jesus needs out of us. Jesus needs us to be passionate people, willing to go on that journey that the Magi went on, the journey towards the light of Christ. And as some words of inspiration for us today as we begin this journey in a new year, I want to share with you these thoughts from the theologian Howard Thurman. When the song of the angel is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among brothers and sisters, to make music in the heart, and to radiate the light of Christ every day, in every way, in all that we do and in all that we say. The work of Christmas lies before us. Amen.